Welcome to the Pursuer live demo. At its core, the Pursuer is a governed cyber investigation and due process platform. It is designed for sensitive cases where you need to investigate suspicious activity, preserve evidence, and involve an outside party while still keeping strict control over what stays internal, what gets shared, and who makes the final decision. To be clear, the Pursuer is not a SIEM. It is not an EDR. It is not a takedown system, and it is not an offensive platform. The Pursuer sits above your existing security tools and provides the missing governance layer. The core idea is simple. Whether an individual is implicated in an investigation or you simply need an outside third party to weigh in, you must remain in strict control of the data at all times. Simply handing over unrestricted access to internal security data, raw evidence, analyst notes, or graph context is unacceptable. You must always know who saw what and when they saw it. The Pursuer creates a controlled, secure, and reliable solution. The fundamental problem in sensitive investigations is the trust boundary. You have to protect the integrity of the investigation, but you also need a secure, controlled way for a third party to contribute. Today, that process is a mess. It's handled through email chains, spreadsheets, and improvised shared folders. That might be fine when the stakes are low, but when a mishandled case can cost millions, it becomes a massive liability. Files get overshared, context is lost, access is not cleanly revoked, counter evidence gets separated from the case, and final decisions are not always tied to a clear and auditable process. The Pursuer solves this by creating a strict separation of the internal investigation and third-party participation. Inside the analyst dashboard, the internal team manages the case. They review evidence, preserve custody, create safe derivative files, control what is released, use bounded graph context, and decide the final outcome. They always retain 100% authority over the case. On the other side, the secure case portal allows third-party participation. This is where they can contribute evidence or other data, view case status, and review any evidence the internal team has approved and released. They never see anything the internal team does not want them to see, never the original, and permission can be revoked at any time. In a high-stakes environment where details matter and mistakes cost millions, the Pursuer isn't just a convenience. It is critical infrastructure. But the problem the Pursuer solves goes far beyond a single cyber workflow. Any team trying to build an industry-specific platform with specialized features, whether for fraud review, vendor disputes, trust and safety, insurance investigations, compliance, financial crime, or enforcement, eventually runs into the same problem. Before they can safely build the features specific to their industry, they first need the trust core that does exactly what the Pursuer was designed for. Building it from scratch is time-consuming, labor-intensive, and most importantly, very expensive. But there is no way around it. Without it, their software is bright lights and smoke. The Pursuer provides the very foundation that teams need to move their projects forward and ensure a successful outcome. I will be walking you through a live demonstration of the entire workflow. This is not theater. I ran every part of what you are about to see on my own machine, recording each step to prove that this isn't the promise of a future product. It is a functioning, foundational platform ready for deployment. At the end, I will explain the business value and provide more details about where we are and what we need to move to the next stage. We begin in the analyst dashboard. This is the internal side of the Pursuer. It is where analysts, reviewers, and administrators manage the investigation, review evidence, control what can be released to the outside party, and make the final case decision. I will be using pre-seeded case data, but it is an accurate representation of what would be encountered during a real investigation. For this demo, we will act as the analyst, the admin, and the reviewer. That means we can see the internal case record, inspect the evidence, use bounded graph context, decide what derivative evidence may be safely shared, review anything the outside party submits, and ultimately resolve the case. Once we are logged in, the reviewer enters the case ID number and loads the due process case. This makes the internal case record along with all relevant information available in one place. This is important because the reviewer is not working from scattered emails, shared folders, or disconnected notes. Instead, the pursuer brings the case context, evidence state, portal activity, release history, and decision workflow together inside a governed, easy-to-navigate internal workspace. Now we switch to the secure case portal. This is the outside party end of the pursuer. The portal user does not receive access to the internal analyst dashboard. They begin with a case-specific invitation token and then complete an email verification step before a secure, limited portal session is open. Once verified, the outside party receives controlled access to this one case only. They can see only the released derivative files that the internal reviewer has approved. They do not see raw internal evidence, internal notes, graph analysis, custody records, or the full investigation workspace. This is the controlled boundary pursuer creates. The outside party can participate, review approved derivative evidence, and submit their own information. But the internal reviewer remains in control of what is shared, what is revoked, and how the case is ultimately resolved. Now they can open the File Shared With You section. This is where they view the derivative files the reviewer has released. Each file is tied back to the case record and includes controlled identifiers, ID numbers, and file details. The outside party is not receiving raw evidence. They are seeing only approved derivatives connected to a specific case. The pursuer can show what was shared, who it was shared with, and when. This creates transparency and trust for the outside party while keeping strict internal control over the investigation. The outside party can also submit counter evidence or supporting evidence back into the case. This gives them a real participation path, not just a view-only portal. They can upload a document, screenshot, email, log export, network capture, or other relevant files. They also identify the evidence type and choose the appropriate consent level for how that material may be handled. Because the session is tied to a specific case, the submission is automatically connected to the correct case record and intended for review by the internal reviewer. The point is that the outside party can respond, but still do not have access to the internal investigation. Their evidence comes back into the governed review process where the internal reviewer can inspect it, preserve it, and consider it before making a final decision. Now that the outside party has uploaded this file, it has become part of the case record. It is no longer sitting outside the process in an email inbox or shared folder. The pursuer has brought it into the governed workflow, where it can be reviewed, preserved, and considered as part of the investigation. Now logged in as an admin, I'm uploading new internal evidence into the analyst dashboard. The pursuer registers the file, stores it, records integrity details like hash and size, and connects it to the investigation. Using the new evidence ID, I'm creating the metadata for the derivative. This creates the official record that tells the pursuer what this derivative is, where it came from, and why it exists. From this point on, it stays connected to the original evidence inside the investigation. I give the derivative a file name and describe what kind of file it is and choose the derivative type. I then provide the reason this derivative is being created. The pursuer is building the chain of context. The original evidence remains protected. The derivative is being created as a separate governed artifact, and the system now has a record showing the relationship between the two. This is what prevents uncontrolled file sharing. We are not dragging a copy into an email or dropping it into a shared folder. We are creating a traceable, reviewable, controlled derivative inside the case workflow. Now the derivative record exists. The pursuer has created a relationship between the original evidence and the derivative. The original remains protected. This is where it becomes more than metadata. The pursuer receives the portal-safe artifact itself and links it to the case record. Just like internal evidence, this is not treated as a casual attachment. The upload is finalized so the system can record the file as a controlled artifact with integrity details and workflow state. From there, the derivative is released to the secure case portal. This is a deliberate reviewer-controlled action, and the only way an outside party can view evidence. The important point is that you are not sharing the entire case or giving access to raw evidence. It is releasing a single approved derivative file to one outside party. Back in the secure case portal, the new derivative file is now available to the outside party because the internal reviewer explicitly released it. They are not seeing the original evidence, the analyst workspace, or the full investigation. They are only seeing the approved derivative. That is the point, to have controlled disclosure, not uncontrolled sharing. And if the need arises, access can be denied just as quickly as it was given. If the reviewer determines that the file should no longer be available, access can be revoked, and only an authorized internal administrator can reverse that decision. Once that happens, the change is immediately reflected in the secure case portal. The outside party no longer sees that file. It has been removed from their approved portal view. This is a major difference between the pursuer and ordinary file sharing. The organization keeps full control even after something has been shared. We are nearing the end, and it is time to explain why the pursuer is truly a powerful investigation tool. Individual data files and documents without context can be a major contributor to bad outcomes and exposure to unnecessary liability. That is where the graph lookup feature comes in. The point of this is simple. In a serious investigation, one piece of information rarely tells the whole story. A login, a domain, an IP address, or a suspicious file may look concerning on its own. But what really matters is what that item is connected to. Graph lookup helps the reviewer see those connections. Instead of forcing the team to jump between tools, emails, notes, and spreadsheets, the pursuer brings the surrounding context into the case. It helps show whether something appears isolated, whether it connects to other suspicious activity, or whether the concern may be weaker than it first appeared. That is important because this platform is not designed to rush to judgment. It is designed to help the reviewer slow down, see the bigger picture, and make a better decision. The graph does not decide the outcome. It does not accuse anyone. It simply gives the internal team a clearer map of the surrounding facts. And in a high-stakes case, that matters. Because the wrong decision can damage a person, expose an organization, or turn a manageable investigation into a major liability. This feature helps make sure the final decision is based on context, not just a single disconnected signal. Ultimately, every investigation has to end. At this point, all the evidence has been examined, the outside party's response has been considered, and the reviewer signs in to record the final conclusion. In this case, the reviewer determines that the suspected party did not act with malicious intent. In fact, based on the evidence, the reviewer believes this person should be cleared completely. The conclusion is stated plainly and directly, so there is no confusion about what was decided, why, or who made the final call. That matters for this case, but it also matters for future cases, because once the decision is recorded, it does not disappear into someone's inbox or get buried in a folder. It becomes part of the case history. If a related issue comes up later, the organization is not starting from zero. So the value is not only closing this investigation cleanly, it is building an institutional memory that can help future reviewers make better decisions. Now that you have seen the pursuer in action, it's time to answer the important questions. Why would someone want the pursuer? And how does that translate into profit? There are two answers. The first is avoiding liability. In high-stakes investigations, the risk isn't just making the wrong decision. It's being unable to prove that your process was controlled, fair, and evidence-based. This is exactly where cases are won or lost. It is the difference between paying out a massive settlement and a swift, defensible dismissal. The pursuer provides a level of confidence that allows an organization to decisively close a case, knowing their process is solid. When the storm hits and millions of dollars in careers are on the line, the pursuer isn't a software expense. It is an insurance policy. The question isn't what it costs to deploy, it's what it costs when you don't. The second answer is dramatically reducing development costs. Any team building industry-specific investigation tools, whether for fraud, HR, compliance, or financial crime, must first build the truth core. They need that same foundation. Building it from scratch burns capital and stalls speed to market. For startups, it's prohibitively expensive. For enterprise teams, it's a massive drain on engineering resources. The Pursuer eliminates that roadblock. Builders can license a proven, production-ready foundation, allowing them to skip the infrastructure build and focus entirely on their market. So the profit path is two-sided. For direct customers, the Pursuer is a high-value governance and liability reduction platform. For software developers, it's the infrastructure layer they would otherwise spend millions recreating. That is the business value. The Pursuer isn't just a tool for a single cyber demo. It is the governed evidence layer for any high-stakes system where access, fairness, and final decisions matter. The Pursuer is currently entering a controlled pilot with a select group of early adopters, which will rapidly scale into broader market deployments. To execute this next phase, we are raising a $500,000 seed round. This capital is allocated directly toward final production readiness and polish, comprehensive third-party security audits, operational support, and targeted go-to-market execution. I don't expect you to just take my word for it. I welcome deep technical due diligence. I am ready to walk your team through a live, interactive demo or have your experts examine the code base directly. Thank you for your time and attention. If you recognize the critical infrastructure gap we are solving, I invite you to reach out directly to discuss investment and partnership opportunities.